I think if you go to your doctor and you say I have OSDD 1A and the doctor types in his computer what's that and there's nothing there, that's not, very like useful.
Can I tell you that that happened to us?
Really.
Yeah,
Hello,
I'm
everyone. Welcome to a new video of Power to the Plurals. My name is Bailey from the Stronghold System, and I am here today joined by the Alexandrite System. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hey, I am Claudia from the Alexandrite System. We do YouTube videos and we call ourselves intra-community educators. We do a channel about systems by a system for systems.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you
So
for having us.
we invited you here today to talk about OSDD, other specified dissociative disorder.
Mhm.
You have OSDD. Can you explain to the people who don't know what OSDD is?
So OSDD, I think the simplest way to explain it is DID, but not. You're still multiple, but you're missing a criteria or like a couple of criteria from the like official diagnostic criteria. So typically it's some combination of not enough amnesia to qualify or not enough variation between system members.
Mm.
Um, there's also things like you have a variety of, enough variation between system members, but none of them front except for like one of them. Stuff like that. It's any sort of combination that doesn't fit well enough into DID.
Right. Okay. Thank you for explaining.
Mhm.
So you have OCD yourself. What is it like for you?
I think the way that we vary from the typical DID experience is that we don't black out. To again put it simply, we do have some memory issues. We have some amnesia, but it mostly comes in the form of what's called emotional amnesia.
Mm.
So we may remember something, but there is no like emotion connected at all to it. Like somebody else holds that bit of emotion. One thing that I think that DID systems don't relate to as much with OSDD systems is the idea that sometimes we don't know who's fronting, and sometimes we never realize the switch has happened.
Mm.
Um, because there is no gap between us, sometimes it can be difficult to tell like the I guess the way best way to put it is like the flavors between us. Um, and of course, I mean like blending and that sort of thing is a whole different issue. But sometimes you'll be out for like several minutes, an hour, maybe even you don't even realize until you've already switched out, and you're like, oh, I've been here for a bit, huh?
Mm. Right. Okay, that's interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
thank you.
So we already talked a little bit about what the difference is between DID and OCD, right? We live with DID ourselves, or we were diagnosed with DID back in the day. And actually, the DSM talks about out of the ordinary forgetting and
Mm-hmm.
not so much amnesia. Um, and so, what is out of the ordinary forgetting? I always joke that if you have a psychiatrist that is like above 60, then their concept of out of the ordinary forgetting is very different than when you have a 25-year-old psychiatrist, right? Which is really weird that it could work like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very subjective. I mean, I think that I mean, we've done a couple of videos on this. One we talked about the idea of do we have DID or OSDD, because honestly, we kind of skirt the line between both.
Hmm.
Um, and honestly, I think that most systems probably skirt the line between both because while we don't ever like black out, there are like full memories that don't carry over between us. Especially if there are moments from our past where we suspect that we like fully blacked out, but one, we don't know for sure, and two, if that were true, that would qualify us for DID under the DSM-5 because past, if you like used to have full amnesia but you don't anymore, you're still DID. Whereas under the DSM-4, I believe that would qualify you for DDNOS.
Okay, interesting. Because like if you don't remember, then how do you know you're having amnesia for it, right? So
Yeah.
it's really hard to differentiate, like to know for sure. I think also for a therapist to diagnose us people with. Do you know how many people have OSDD in the world? It's a 4.5% from a meta-analysis study of 98 different studies, and it's 31,000 people, college students, that they gave the DES, the dissociative experience scale test, and 4.5% scored for OSDD and 3.7% for DID. That's a
I'm
lot.
not surprised that it ends up being more common than DID.
Because we hear so much about DID and barely like anything about OSDD, right? It's very hard to find information. You have a fantastic YouTube channel, and there are a few other people, but it's a lot easier to find information about DID, I think.
I think that the reason why that might be is just because DID is kind of flashier, if that makes sense. Like it's more of a spectacle. Like,
right.
What am I gonna say? Really, like if the opening of the like Sally Field Sybil wasn't her blacking out, it was just her like kind of vaguely not remembering parts of her day, it wouldn't be as punchy of an opening.
Yep. So yeah, it's quite a lot of people who have OSDD, right? Turns out, or could have, because they're not all diagnosed, of course. They just like gave this test to people to find out. But I was surprised to see that it was higher than DID myself. And I hope one day it's actually reflected in like, you know, us clients will get diagnosed. That would be good.
We can only hope.
So sometimes people with DID, like myself, experience that they experience less and less amnesia. Like I have vivid memories of being super scared when I lost time. Like I just knew I completely blacked out and I had no idea what happened. But now that doesn't really happen anymore. If it would happen, I would probably assume something bad happened. Which is also not like the best thing to auto assume, but like it would be very random, right? So luckily it doesn't happen that often anymore. But I was diagnosed 10 years ago, right? So I've been on this path for a long time. So some people, when they experience this, technically you could go from DID to OSDD criteria-wise in the DSM. I think that's really weird to use that word because I don't think there's any other disorder where you can go from like borderline to bipolar for some reason, right? So why could you go from DID to OSDD?
I mean, it was sort of what I was saying before with how in the DSM-4 it was exactly like that. You essentially get like downgraded. Not that like OSDD, DDNOS is like lesser than DID in any way, but you know, we're not theoretically not a DID system, so I couldn't tell you how that would make me feel like being quote unquote downgraded.
Right.
But I could imagine that would probably feel kind of invalidating. Or maybe not. Maybe it would feel great. Maybe it would feel like, okay, we're starting to like get a handle on this.
Right. Yeah. Maybe for some people.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to the community because we got a post in our support group Alternation on Facebook. And in there, someone said, hey, I read this thing about OSDD on the didresearch.org website. And I think I have OSDD 1B. And our moderation team, there were people there saying like, that text is like, is incorrect or something. We have to find the DSM and actually like compare the two. And then we realized that there was no OSDD 1A or 1B in the DSM-5. There were only 4 examples, and later it turned out to actually be 7 examples. And so we wrote this article not to invalidate people's experience or the labels they use, because we know whole communities are built around this online and maybe also offline. I don't know about those, but they might be there. But because we found it important that people were aware of the technical aspects as the DSM explains them, because we couldn't find any other sources for the OSDD 1A and 1B claim besides in a YouTube video from someone who used the information from didresearch.org. So it just led back to that same one website again. And at first we thought it was a clinical website, but it seems to be ran by a group of systems, which is fantastic. You know, that they are writing articles. I write articles myself. I also get things wrong sometime, or my interpretation is different than how most people see it, right? But in this article, it read very much as if it was fact. And someone said, like, maybe they did an auto change of all the words on their website from DDNOS to OSDD. That's how it happened. I don't know if that's true. But it was an idea that someone had about what could have happened. So OSDD seems to be a sort of umbrella label, because it has 7 different examples, right? Mm-hmm. And currently, as a community, we're only pointing out 2 of the 7. Mm-hmm. I mean, calling them A and B. There was A and B in the DDNOS. It was not diagnosable. It was also examples, and you can further specify it as in the diagnostic code. So, but it was there. But now it's just 7 examples, and there might even be more because it's examples, right? So it's not a set in stone thing. Do you like that it's an umbrella label like that, or would you have preferred that it were not just examples, but actual specific things that could be coded?
I like the umbrella.
Yeah.
And I think that any sort of umbrella label is going to capture a lot more experiences than something, you know, the reason why OSDD theoretically exists is because not enough people fit cleanly into DID, but still basically have DID.
Right.
So, you know, the fact that we don't have to, you know, set a 3rd umbrella up here, just finish catching everything with this one. It makes it cleaner, makes it easier, and I think it's more validating to systems who either have a combination of what we know as A and B, or if they experience neither of those exactly, but they experience something that doesn't fit into DID. It gives those people a place. Yeah.
I think it's good that it's more of an umbrella, and that also that it encompasses more types of multiplicity and plurality than just the 2 things, because indeed I thought, like, but what about everyone else, right, that is disordered but doesn't fit in the A and B? Like, what happens with them? So I'm glad I looked into this and found out that those people, you know, fit the umbrella OSDD label. What do you think about this discovery that we did?
I think that it is always good to get correct information out there. I don't know how much of an impact it'll have community-wise, you know, because I think that when people find a label that works for them, they're hesitant to move from it. So in our system, Sandra identified as a lesbian for a long time, and then realized that she still is attracted to men. And she was very hesitant to even like admit she was attracted to men because she, was clinging to the lesbian label.
Mm.
And I think labels can be really limiting, but I think they can also be really powerful. It's something that you can claim for yourself and say, like, especially in terms of like a neurodivergency, it's sort of like reframing it or flipping it. It's like, if somebody calls me autistic as an insult, I mean, it'll be whatever. But, it's supposed to hurt more than if I say, yeah, I'm autistic.
Right. Yeah, we're huge
Does that make
fans
sense?
of, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah. We're huge fans of people using their own language and the labels they're comfortable with.
Mhm.
We hope the benefit is that people who don't fit A and B uh, will feel more included and have an easier time entering the OSDD community.
Mhm.
We hope it leads to less gatekeeping, and also just to correct, like, I think if you go to your doctor and you say I have OSDD 1A and the doctor types in his computer what's that and there's nothing there, that's not very like useful in the situation. So in that regards, I hope that also does something good for the overall community.
Can I tell you that that happened to us?
Really?
Yeah, I'm as we were talking before, I was like just connecting the dots.
Wow.
We like called therapists while we were looking for one and told them, like, we have OSCD one B, whatever we have.
Right.
And none of them knew what we were talking about. And at the time we were like, how do they not know this? This seems like,
Yeah.
a pretty basic thing. It's because it's not a thing.
See, this is why it's important that good, correct information is out there.
Hmm.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. One of my questions is, should there be OSDD 1A and 1B in the DSM-6, in your opinion?
No,
No.
I think that OSDD covers it well enough, and I think that I know there was some talk of essentially not having that section of OSDD altogether, just sort of like meshing it in with DID,
Hmm.
and I think that's I think that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like, I know that would probably be, again, invalidating for a lot of people,
Hmm.
but I think that at the same time, it's like tell me the fundamental difference in treating someone with DID versus OSDD.
Right.
And it's like there's not too much.
Right. Just more amnesia, I guess, to deal with in a DID system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I also think, like, we talked with Gene Reisman and also other people who are like Alyssa, who are older DID systems.
Mhm.
And they explained to us about how in 1994 MPD, uh, you know, got taken out of the DSM and DID came in its place. Different
Mhm.
disorder, right? Not really the same thing, because with MPD, you didn't really need to be disordered. You just needed to have alters.
Mhm.
And in DID, you needed clinical distress and amnesia. So it's a very short explanation. But a lot of people who had an MPD diagnosis didn't qualify for the DID diagnoses, and they felt very invalidated and very hurt and scared. And then we saw the same thing happening in 2013 in the local support group we were in, with people who were really scared to lose their diagnoses because they changed from DSM-4 to DSM-5, right?
Mhm.
And so this seems to be a repetitive thing for our community. So I think it's really good if we, as as plurals or multiples or whatever word we use, right, to just to describe the experience, find that truth in ourselves, that we validate ourselves more, or at least at the same level as that we value the diagnoses that we get from a doctor. So when they change these clinical texts and we don't match them anymore, it doesn't change our experience, right? We're still the same people. We still have the same experience as the day before. Just because the DSM-5 or 6 comes out doesn't change anything about my reality. And realizing that, I think, can be really helpful in these situations.
Yeah, I think that anytime that you base your identity on something that someone else can change, you're kind of not, I don't want to say that you're not putting your best interests out there, but I think that you should maybe have a backup. Like if, I'll just leave it at, I think that you should have a backup.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have words for anyone who may think or feel that this actually affects their experience?
Ultimately, you are the only people that can describe your own experiences, because you are the, I was going to say you're the only one in your head, but no, it's not quite true. You're the only ones who get to live your life. And if your experience you feel is best described as OSDD1A, OSDD1B, OSDD1, OSDD, DDNOS, DID. How could I forget that one? If you feel one of those labels describes you well, then go with it. I mean, it's not like you're filling out it's not like you're filling out the insurance forms properly. And it's, if you don't feel like any of those describe you, then go with something else. You're multiple, you're plural, you're a system, you're many people, you're crazy. I don't know. That some people enjoy that. But it's ultimately up to you. Anyone who tells you that you have to go with what they are saying is either a jerk or is selling you something. So, I don't know. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, by the way. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Those were good words. Appreciate
better, or maybe hold your community more accountable to provide accurate information. You know, in theory, if didresearch.org did really just find replace DDNOS to OSDD, then that means that they didn't. I mean, either way, it feels like they didn't read the DSM-5, which, I mean, like, on one hand, do they really need to? But on the other hand, if they're didresearch.org, like, I think that people in the community should maybe be held accountable if they put themselves in a higher status than everyone else.
Yeah, the article only mentioned 2 resources in the footer. One was a book about MPD from 1994, which is like, we're talking OSDD, so like that just doesn't make sense. And then the other resource was The Hunt Itself, which is the book about the theory of structural dissociation, which doesn't talk about OSDD, only about DDNOS, because it was published in 2012, and DDNOS was was added in the DSM-5 in 2013. So they could have known, like, I'm annoyed that they didn't just like go with OSDD. Like, you're publishing a book for the future, right? Not for the past. So it's weird to me, but anyway, their choice. But so those were the only 2 resources for this whole article about OSDD 1A and 1B. And The Hunt Itself does mention DDNOS 1A and 1B, but not OSDD. So that's
Yikes.
where confusion comes from. So they should have read the DSM. I asked on Twitter, like, hey, do you have resources on OSDD 1A and 1B? And like the only thing people could find was also the same article, right? And we also researched on Google Scholar. We had people log into their university libraries to like check if there was anything else out there. There was one proposal by someone, but it was just a proposal.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know you tweeted at us to see if like we could turn up anything, and we didn't even process that idea fully because we actually have read that section of the DSM before.
Yeah.
We love bringing up some stuff in it because I think it's interesting, but it never crossed our minds that like, oh, A and B aren't actually in there. It's just
Right.
OSDD 1.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 to 4. And then like what I also find annoying is that it only has like the description, no explanation text anymore, like it had in the DSM-4. This is completely erased. Like I don't like that at all. I think it deserves its own explanation section, especially if it has 7 different examples. Like, come on. So if you scroll all the way up to where dissociative disorder starts, then there it explains a little bit about OSDD, like 1 paragraph or something. And in there it says like there was actually 7 examples. But I've never heard someone say I have OSDD 6, right? But someone could like say it would make more sense than OSDD 1A and 1B because that actually is not in there.
You made the book like 850 pages already. Just throw it in.
Right.
Like, is it really going to take up that much more of your time?
Yeah, and it costs $20 million. Like, we were talking about it, and there was like a discussion with our team if it should have been like a different kind of comma or something in the spelling, and they were like, man, they must have made a mistake. And I was like, come on, the book is $20 million. Like, let's not assume they made mistakes. Like,
I can think of far better ways to spend $20 million and to get more done and do more for the community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we are on YouTube at the Alexandrite System. You can find a lot of videos on there. I just put one up recently on questions that systems are probably wishing that you would ask. We also have a Twitter at We Are Alexandra, WEARE Alexandra. Instagram, basically any social media you can think of, we're probably We Are Alexandra on there. And if not, we need to get on that.
Awesome. And all links will be down below in the description as well. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your lived experience with OSDD. We really appreciate it to have your input in this video and like the letter that we're publishing. We think it's so super important to have that lived experience included. And thank you for all your work that you do on YouTube. We really appreciate all the videos you're putting out and how you're normalizing living with OSDD. We really appreciate that so much. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. It means a lot to me, and it's really cool being here and being on the other end of an interview.
Yes. We were on the Alexandrite System YouTube channel before, so go check out that video as well if you want to see us interact more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.